Throughout the Mario series, there have been several amazing concepts for enemies, some that were implemented in many games and we all enjoy encountering whenever they're included in a new installment in the series, but others are really cool in concept but we don't get to see very often. Those are the characters that I'll be focusing on today. This list is going to be comprised of enemies from the main Mario games, as most characters introduced for spin-off titles are usually kept in those series of games anyway. For each entry, I'll be looking at how they were implemented in existing games and how they can be used in future games to come, and with that being said, welcome to the top 10 Mario enemies that should be in more games. Coming in at number 10 are the Sting Bees. These guys are little bee enemies that roam around levels in the air looking for an opportunity to launch themselves at Mario for an attack. They made their first appearances in Super Mario 3D Land and reappeared in Super Mario 3D World, serving the same purpose as they did in the first game. They make appearances in Mario Kart 7 as enemies in a battle course too. Honestly, since these enemies were introduced fairly recently, it makes sense as to why they haven't appeared in many Mario games. I'm putting them on this list because I really like the concept and it is used very well in 3D titles, so I would like them to be put in more. However, they're also here for me to give ideas as to how they could be implemented into 2D titles. While their following Mario around lends way more to the 3D side, I feel they could also work really well in a 2D game, acting in a similar manner to the Boo. The similarity being that they follow Mario around, but the difference being that they won't stop when looked at and they are killable by jumping on them. This could make them a type of enemy that could be very useful, as it doesn't really make sense to include a Boo in a Plains type level, but the Sting Bees could act as an equivalent to them in those types of levels, with some differences to spice it up. These enemies could be very fun to see in some spin-off titles too, like in a Mario and Luigi game where they could attack you in the overworld, commencing a battle, and because of these reasons, that is why I chose the Sting Bees for number 10. At number 9, I chose the Madpoles. Only appearing in Super Mario 3D World, I feel that these enemies could lend to many possibilities for future Mario games, but I'll get to that in a little bit. First of all, what are Madpoles exactly? Well, basically what they do is swim on the surface of water and ram into Mario as their only attack. They are easily defeated and aren't the most threatening when they're on their own, but in a group these guys can be pretty scary. This is how I feel that they should be implemented in upcoming Mario games. Having a horde of these enemies come at you, forcing you to stop and consider how to defeat them. This horde idea lends itself more to 3D titles, so in the upcoming Mario title for the Nintendo Switch, I would hope to see these enemies implemented. If they were to be included in 2D titles, it would be very difficult to implement them, because in 3D World the water was low enough in areas that contain them to allow the Madpoles to be able to swim on the surface to attack you, which is what they were originally designed for. In 2D Mario games, however, you don't see that too often. Most of the time you're either underwater completely, so having enemies on the surface wouldn't even matter, or you would be in a beach type of level where these guys wouldn't be able to put themselves in groups as there isn't any space. This is why they must be included in 3D titles, if they were to keep the exact same concept. I do have an idea for a spin-off title though. Maybe in a Mario Party game there could be a mini game where the Madpoles try to ram themselves at the players and you have to dodge them. If you get hit, you fall off a platform and are eliminated from the game. I know this concept is so overused, but if they wanted to reuse it but change the enemies involved, I think the Madpoles could be used very well in that type of situation. For those reasons, I chose the Madpoles for number 9. Coming in at number 8 are the Snow Spikes. Quite often nowadays you'll see the regular spikes and stone spikes in levels, with the stone spikes taking the role in mountain-like levels, where the regular spikes assume the same role almost everywhere else. The reason I said almost is because in snow-themed levels, the snow spike takes charge, for only one game, for only one level. Yes, the only main game appearance for the snow spikes is in New Super Mario Bros. DS in World 5-1. The only other appearance they make is in Paper Mario's Sticker Star. What this enemy does is akin to the other spikes, as it throws a ball at Mario. However, instead of a spike or stone ball, this is a snowball. This is actually very interesting though, and changes it from the other two drastically. The snowballs that these enemies throw get larger as they roll, literally becoming larger and larger obstacles for Mario to avoid. These snowballs aren't entirely bad for Mario either, as they will take out enemies in their path, and it is this concept of the snowball that I wanted to put the snow spikes on this list. Their only use so far is in a 2D title being placed at the top of a hill or on a higher platform to allow the ball to roll and continually get larger. And while I think that this concept could still work really well in future 2D titles, I think it would be really cool to see these enemies in 3D games. The spikes are placed in some really neat ways to provide fun challenges in 3D titles, and I feel it could work the same way for this variant while presenting a different type of challenge to the player. For example, in Super Mario 3D World, the regular spikes could be placed in a position where they throw a spiky log at you and you have to hop over it as you scale the hill to eventually stomp on this spike. However, for the snow variant, how it could work is it throws a snowball at you, and if you're quick enough you could hop over, but if not, you'll have to go a different route, perhaps a more difficult one. With the additional third dimension, I could see several more awesome ways the snow spikes could be implemented into levels, which is why they are number 8 on this list. At number 7, I chose the Skeeters. Now, you may recognize these enemies from areas like Wet Dry World in Super Mario 64. And they also appear in Sunshine and Galaxy 2, but those aren't the Skeeters I'm talking about today. I think those ones are cool, but they don't serve much of a purpose as they're easily beatable and just give you a couple of coins. Pretty pointless hazards that are easily replaceable with other enemies, which is why instead of these, I'm going to be talking about the Skeeters from New Super Mario Bros. DS. Heck, their names are exactly the same in English. However, if you look at the Japanese names, it really explains the difference between these two types of Skeeters, as the ones from New Super Mario Bros. Are called bomb Skeeters. Initially, these guys don't look too threatening, and honestly, if you don't plan on swimming below them, you'd be correct in saying that. You could easily just jump on them and boom, they're gone. But in instances where you have to swim underneath the platform they're set on, they could be very dangerous. These Skeeters drop a bomb below them into the water, which is something you'll need to learn how to avoid if you plan on getting all the star coins in the game. I feel that if these enemies were implemented into some newer games, this dropping a bomb concept could be used in some really fun and interesting ways. Imagine a level almost entirely underwater, except at the top of the screen were some Skeeters that would be dropping bombs on you. That could make for some really fun and interesting challenges, and yes, like I mentioned before, the regular Skeeters have been included in some 3D Mario titles, however these bomb variants haven't, and I think they could be used in some very neat ways in a 3D environment. Perhaps there is an obstacle in your way that you require the Skeeter to destroy to get the requirement for the level, like a red coin for instance. The potential for very awesome ideas is why the Skeeters, or bomb Skeeters, are number 7 on the list. Coming in at number 6 are the Chuckyas, only found in Super Mario 64 and the DS version. These guys are really stressful to encounter, and here's why. Chuckyas' main concept is to grab Mario and throw him, and quite often they are placed on top of a hill or a very hard to reach area, and when you finally make it there, you have to really try not to get caught, or else you will get thrown and have to do it all over again. This enemy concept is really interesting to me, and if included in more titles, I think this could be something that becomes a staple in 3D Mario games. The Chuckyas are a subspecies to the Bob-ombs, which you see everywhere. Most of the time, people don't take Bob-ombs as too much of a threat, but when you see the giant purple one on your screen, you know there is a challenge up ahead. It would be very difficult to implement these enemies into 2D titles, as there usually isn't much climbing going on in those levels. They're usually much more about going on a flat area, horizontally, to reach a point, rather than scaling a mountain or doing something vertically. That's not really the challenge for 2D titles. This is why 3D levels are much better for these enemies, because height is used as a factor to reach the goal as much as anything else. It makes me wonder why these enemies haven't been implemented into titles outside of one game. I think the Chuckyas could work very well in a game like 3D World where lots of climbing is involved. After all, that is the purpose of the cat power-up. There isn't much I could change about the enemy. I like the concept and would love to see it in more games in the future, which is why the Chuckya is at the number 6 spot. Coming in at number 5 are the Prongos, only appearing in Super Mario 3D Land. The concept of these enemies is pretty interesting. They can't be defeated normally because of the spikes around them, but they do try to ram themselves at Mario, and when they do and miss, the spikes that protected them originally lead to their demise, as they get stuck in the ground. Once they are flipped over, they are vulnerable to attacks, which is how they are defeated. I like this concept and wish it was used in more games. Not only could it be good to continue using it in 3D titles, which is the original purpose, but it could also work well in 2D titles, as there wouldn't be a need to change them up in any way. They would just charge and hurl themselves at you, and they would be even more difficult to defeat, because in a 2D game they would be more difficult to dodge. In spin-off titles, I see some possibilities too. In a Mario and Luigi game, fighting them could be a really big time-based affair. In 3D land, if you were unable to jump on them within the first few seconds of them getting stuck in the ground, they would be able to get out, and you have to try again. In a Mario and Luigi title, this time would be much faster. Not only would you have to time your jumps to dodge them, but there would also be a certain amount of hits you would have to get off to defeat them. They would be pretty challenging force to go up against in a scenario like that, which is why I want the Prongos to be in more games, and why they're number 5 on the list. Coming in as spot number 4 are the Bruisers, first appearing in New Super Mario Bros. And then reappearing in most of the games in that series that followed. These enemies make their home in ghost houses. Normally found with blocks in front of them, the concept of these enemies is that they can break those blocks and charge at Mario trying to attack him. These enemies run fast though, and through this, their direction becomes pretty aimless. They go towards Mario, but if you simply jump over them, they will keep going for a little while before they try to take you down again. These guys are no pushover though, taking 3 hits or a ground pound to defeat. I think these enemies are pretty cool and definitely fit the Ghost House theme. They've appeared in 4 main series titles and 2 spin-offs, so they are in more games than many of the enemies on the list. However, there is a bigger reason that they are mentioned here. Out of the main series games they've appeared in, they're all 2D, but I think the Bruisers could work really well in a 3D environment. By all means, keep these enemies in 2D games. They're fun to encounter, and some of the ways they are used in the game are extremely creative, but I feel there is potential to have more opportunities with this enemy in 3D levels too. Having more space for Mario to move around means that, say, a group of 3 Bruisers could be an interesting obstacle to encounter. Perhaps there's a wall of blocks in your way and you must lure one of the Bruisers to break it, making sure that you don't kill them. Maybe Bruisers will be included for the new Mario title on the Switch, and if they are, I can see a lot of potential for how they could be used. It certainly would add an additional challenge to some of the levels, which is why the Bruisers are at number 4. For spot number 3, I chose the Draglets. Originally, I was thinking of including the Rex enemy from Super Mario World on this list. After all, these enemies have a cool design, and having them in a 3D environment could be very interesting. However, there were some issues with this idea, mainly the fact that despite the awesome look, they're just a pretty lame enemy. All they do is walk around normally and are either defeated in 2 hits or with a simple spin jump. But then I discovered the Draglets, an enemy from Super Mario 3D Land who has an awesome design like the Rex, but does so much more. You know how the Rex has wings but doesn't fly? Well, the Draglets can fly, and shoot fire too. They are a great concept and capture the exact way I envisioned the Rex in a 3D environment. These guys only appear in 1 game though, so I would love to see them in more. Honestly, I was surprised that they weren't included in 3D World, as the game is very similar to 3D Land where they make their first appearance, and there are several points in the game that I think these enemies could be used well in. In a 2D environment, I feel these enemies could just fly around at varying heights and occasionally shoot fireballs. And in some spin-off games, I think they could be implemented very well. Hazards are a big deal in spin-offs, be it Mario Kart or an RPG, and these enemies could be used very well as interesting hazards. Not only would you have to avoid the Draglets themselves, but also the fireballs that they shoot. Honestly, I just love the concept behind these enemies, and they are great replacements for the Rexes, which is why the Draglets are at number 3. Coming in at number 2 are the Fizzlets. These guys are really cool in concept, but for some reason are only included in 2 games. Their first appearance was in Super Mario Galaxy 2, and then they reappeared in 3D World. While their designs differ slightly between the 2 games, what they do is pretty much the same. In Galaxy 2, they are purple blobs that hop around and form a yellow puddle that hurts you if you touch it, and you can only attack it while it's in its purple form. In 3D World, they are no longer able to jump and are stuck in a fixed position. However, they do the same thing by turning into a yellow puddle that will hurt Mario if he touches it. As to which version I prefer, I would honestly say a mix of the 2. I like the jumping ability from Galaxy 2, however the design of the 3D World Fizzlet I like better. So in a new game appearance, I would like to see a mix of both. I feel there is a ton of potential for Fizzlets in future Mario games, especially 3D ones, as this concept is specifically geared for a 3D environment. In a 2D game, I think they could work the same way, however they wouldn't be as challenging because they would be easy to hop over. Keeping the Fizzlets in new 3D Mario titles would be a great thing, because of how unique the concept of these little guys are. In a spin-off title, I could actually see this enemy working really well in a sports game. Yep, I said it, a Mario sports game including the Fizzlets, however not as playable characters. For example, in a soccer game, these enemies could hop around on the field and spread out to either stop the player's movement temporarily, slow them down, or if they have a ball, relieve them from it. This isn't the only possibility in sports though. Even in a game of Mario Baseball, this could be a chemistry item that you launch onto the field to have the same effects as mentioned before. The Fizzlets are really awesome Mario enemies and in my opinion should be included in more games, which is why they're number 2 on the list. Finally, coming in at the number 1 spot are the Cooligans. The penguin power-up is one of the most beloved in the Mario series. How could it not be? I mean, you run around as a penguin shooting ice balls, and you could slide to break blocks. So, because of how awesome this power-up is, it would be an interesting idea to have an enemy that could slide just like the penguin power-up. Enter the Cooligans, enemies that made their debut in New Super Mario Bros. Wii. These enemies embrace the double meaning of cool. They are found in snow levels and slide along the ice, attempting to ram into Mario. They are avoidable by jumping over them, however you aren't always safe as they can change direction. However, if you want to defeat them, you must stomp on them twice, with the first jump knocking off their glasses and slowing them down, with the second being the final blow. I really like these enemies. Their design is just as their name implies, cool, and I love their concept. These enemies are only in 2D games though, excluding Mario Party 9 and Paper Mario Sticker Star, which are the only 2 spin-off games they appear in. This leaves potential for them to be implemented into 3D titles, and I can see a lot of possibilities for them. First of all, I believe that they could work well in the same way as their 2D versions, although probably would be put in groups so they wouldn't be very easy to avoid. Perhaps make it a quicker time for them to turn around after sliding past you to create a larger challenge. In spin-off games, they are implemented in very unique ways, where in Sticker Star they actually stand up in the overworld, and in Mario Party 9 they are rideable in a minigame. More creative ideas to include them in Mario games is something I think will be very fun to play through, which is why I want them in more Mario games. This makes them number 1 on the list. So what do you think of this list? Tell me in the comments below what Mario enemy you think deserves more spotlight, and be sure to leave a like and subscribe to see more countdowns like this one. Thank you so much for watching.